My name is Madeline, Maddie to everyone who knows me, and I just graduated from high school. I live, or should I say lived, with my parents Victoria and Gregory Everett in a well-maintained two-story house with a manicured lawn in Pennsylvania. There's also my older brother Ethan, though he moved out a few years ago to a nearby city. He's 25 now, 7 years older than me, and has always been the golden child of our family. Growing up, my heart ached as I watched how my parents bent over backwards to give Ethan everything he wanted. If he showed the slightest interest in something, they'd jump at the chance to support him, their faces lighting up with excitement. Hockey? They bought him the most expensive gear, my dad beaming with pride at the checkout counter. Drawing? The finest art supplies, delivered in large packages that crowded our living room. Skateboarding? A custom-made board that cost more than my entire wardrobe. It didn't matter that he'd get bored after a few months and move on to the next thing. They were always ready, credit cards in hand, to fund his next adventure. I still feel the sting of this one Christmas that really stuck with me. Ethan's birthday is a week before Christmas, and that year when he turned 16, my parents bought him this super expensive gaming computer he'd been talking about nonstop. Must have cost them a fortune. I saw the price tag they forgot to remove. The next morning, Ethan posted on Instagram, "Best bro gift ever. #blessed." Come Christmas morning, my stomach knotted as I unwrapped my only gift, a card saying Merry Christmas. They said they'd run out of money, not meeting my eyes as they said it. That's pretty much how it always went. Ethan's birthdays were these huge celebrations with awesome presents, relatives driving from hours away, while I'd get whatever was left over at Christmas, if anything at all. My parents never really bothered with my birthdays, a small cake from the grocery store, maybe a new shirt or some school supplies that I needed anyway. That was about it. No parties, no celebrations, nothing that made me feel special or valued. That's why my coffee nearly spilled all over my lap when they sat me down in our living room last week, just days after my graduation. "Maddie," Mom said, smoothing her blouse like she always does when she's trying to appear casual but is actually calculating her words, "we've been thinking. You're turning 18 soon, and it's a big milestone. We want to throw you a proper party." I nearly choked on my coffee, the bitter liquid burning my throat. "A party?" I asked, sure I must have heard wrong, my voice coming out higher than intended. Dad nodded, looking unusually enthusiastic, his accounting-trained eyes not quite matching his smile. "Yes, sweetheart. We'll invite the whole family, make it a real celebration." I sat there staring at them both, my fingers tightening around my mug, trying to figure out what the catch was. My parents aren't the type to suddenly change their ways without a reason. Something was up. I could feel it in my gut, that same twisting sensation I get when something isn't right. "Why now?" I asked, trying to keep the suspicion out of my voice though my heart was racing. "You've never wanted to throw me a party before." "Well, you're graduating high school, going to college soon," Mom said, waving her hand dismissively, her real estate agent smile firmly in place. "It's different now. You're becoming an adult." I nodded slowly, but something didn't feel right. The way they were acting, the sudden interest in celebrating my birthday, it was all too convenient. But I couldn't put my finger on what exactly was wrong, even as alarm bells rang in my head. Over the next few days, I actually started getting excited about the party despite myself. My skepticism began melting away like ice cream on a hot sidewalk. Maybe I'd been too quick to judge my parents' intentions. After all, it made sense. I was turning 18, had just graduated with honors, and was heading off to college soon. Perhaps they'd finally realized that I deserved some recognition too. During my shifts at the cafe, I kept getting notification pings from my mom. My phone screen lit up with her messages about party arrangements, each one filled with an excessive number of emojis. She sent photos of cake options from the local bakery, fabric swatches for decorations, and screenshots of an ever-growing guest list. Dad seemed unusually invested too. He texted me a picture of himself cleaning up the backyard and fixing that wobbly patio furniture he'd been ignoring for months. Do you need any help? I offered one afternoon, finding Mom in the kitchen surrounded by party planning notes, her real estate marketing skills in full effect as she arranged everything just so. She jumped slightly, her hands quickly shuffling some papers together, her wedding ring catching the light. No, sweetie. We want this to be a surprise. Just focus on enjoying your special day, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I shrugged and grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl, the crisp fruit cool against my palm. Okay, if you're sure. By the way, is Ethan coming? Of course he is, Mom replied, but something in her voice sounded off, a slight quaver I'd learned to recognize over the years. He wouldn't miss his little sister's big day. I wanted to believe her, but Ethan hadn't returned any of my texts in the past week, though I could see he'd read them all. Meanwhile, his Instagram was exploding with photos of him at beach parties in Hawaii. Typical Ethan, really, always too busy with his own life to care about anyone else's. 2 days before the party, I was heading downstairs to get a glass of water when the sound of my parents' voices drifted up from the kitchen. I normally wouldn't eavesdrop, but something in Dad's tone, that urgent, slightly panicked edge, made me pause at the top of the stairs, my hand freezing on the banister. Greg, are you sure everything will be perfect? Mom's voice was tense, stripped of its usual polished veneer. Your mother is very particular about these things. My heart skipped a beat. Grandma Olivia was coming? She lived in Massachusetts and rarely visited us. The last time I'd seen her was almost 2 years ago, and my chest tightened with unexpected longing. Victoria, we have to make this work, Dad replied urgently, his voice carrying up the stairs. Mom needs to see that we're making an effort with Maddie. You know how she gets about how we treat the kids. I know, Mom sighed, and I could picture her twisting her hair the way she does when she's stressed. She's always going on about how we favor Ethan, and we can't afford to upset her right now. That money she gave us last year is the only thing keeping us afloat. Their voices dropped lower, but my ears were ringing with what I'd already heard. Everything suddenly made sense, pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. The sudden interest in my birthday, the elaborate party plans, all of it. This wasn't about me at all. This was about impressing Grandma Olivia. I slid down to sit on the top step, my throat tight with disappointment, a lump forming that I couldn't swallow away. Grandma Olivia had always been different from my parents. She saw through Ethan's charm and actually paid attention to me, her eyes soft with understanding when she looked at me. Every time she visited, she'd point out how unfairly my parents treated me compared to Ethan. And I knew she was wealthy. She lived in this beautiful historic house in Massachusetts filled with books and art, and had helped my parents financially several times over the years. The pieces all fell into place, my stomach sinking with each realization. My parents weren't throwing this party to celebrate my achievements or to make up for years of neglect. They were doing it to put on a show for Grandma Olivia, to convince her they were good parents who treated both their children equally. They were trying to secure their financial lifeline, and I was just a prop in their performance. The morning of my birthday, I woke up to the sound of voices and my mother's overly cheerful tone floating up from outside. I peered through my bedroom window, and my heart leaped into my throat. There was Grandma Olivia climbing out of her practical Toyota Camry, her silver hair catching the morning light. I threw on some clothes and rushed downstairs, nearly colliding with Dad in the hallway, my socked feet sliding on the hardwood floor. The moment she saw me, Grandma Olivia's face lit up with genuine warmth, something I hadn't seen much of in our house lately. She opened her arms wide, and I practically ran into them, breathing in her familiar scent. There's my beautiful girl. She hugged me tight, smelling of fresh-baked cookies and that mild lavender soap she always used. When she pulled back, her eyes were sparkling behind her stylish glasses. Let me look at you properly, a high school graduate already. What's next for you, sweetheart? We moved into the living room where Mom had already arranged the furniture to look like something out of a home decor magazine, fresh flowers strategically placed for the photos she'd inevitably post later. I sat next to Grandma on the sofa while my parents perched nervously on the edge of their seats, my mom's phone already in her hand. Well, I started, trying to ignore my mother's intense stare burning into the side of my face. I actually got accepted to several colleges. 2 of them offered me scholarships, I added, a flutter of pride warming my chest. That's wonderful. Grandma squeezed my hand, her touch firm and reassuring. Tell me about them. The state university offered me a full scholarship, I explained, watching my parents nod approvingly, their shoulders visibly relaxing. And then there's Brington College. I hesitated, feeling my confidence waver, knowing my parents thought this option was off the table. It's a really prestigious private school with an amazing journalism program, but the tuition is about $25,000 a year. Grandma Olivia nodded thoughtfully, a small smile playing at her lips, her eyes twinkling with something I couldn't quite read. She didn't say anything, but something in her expression made me wonder if she was already forming plans of her own. The doorbell started ringing as guests arrived, first Aunt Pamela and Uncle Bob, then my cousins, followed by some family friends. Mom rushed around playing the perfect hostess, her phone constantly in hand as she snapped photos for social media, while Dad manned the grill in the backyard, looking uncharacteristically attentive. Mom's latest Instagram post already had the hashtags #perfectfamily and #proudparents. But there was one person notably absent, Ethan. I tried calling him 3 times, but each time it went straight to voicemail. I checked his Instagram and saw he'd posted a story just minutes ago. He was at a beach bar with friends. I asked my mom about him, and she replied he was busy with his auto parts company but would definitely find time to congratulate me later, her smile tight as she glanced nervously at Grandma. The party was in full swing by mid-afternoon. The backyard was filled with the chatter of relatives, family friends, and the smell of grilled food. My mom was live streaming parts of the celebration on her Facebook page, carefully angling the camera to capture the perfect family image. I tried to enjoy myself, but I couldn't shake the weird vibe coming from my parents. They kept hovering around Grandma Olivia like anxious satellites, making sure her glass was always full and her plate never empty, their laughter too loud, their smiles too wide. I was just finishing a piece of birthday cake, the buttercream frosting sweet on my tongue, when Grandma Olivia suddenly stood up, tapping her fork against her glass. The chatter died down as everyone turned to look at her, my mom quickly positioning her phone to capture the moment. "I'd like to say something," she announced, her voice carrying across the yard with the authority of someone used to commanding lecture halls. "Today we're celebrating not just Maddie's 18th birthday, but also her acceptance into college." She smiled warmly at me, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Maddie, honey, I've watched you grow up into an incredible young woman." Unlike some people, she paused meaningfully, her gaze sweeping the crowd. "You've always worked hard and never taken anything for granted." My parents shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. I could see Mom's fingers nervously shredding a paper napkin, small pieces fluttering to the ground like confetti. "When you told me about your acceptance to Brington College," Grandma continued, her voice gaining strength, "I could see how much you wanted to go there, even though you thought it was out of reach." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, the cream-colored paper catching the sunlight. "That's why I've decided to give you a special gift." She walked over and handed me the envelope, her steps sure and purposeful. My hands were shaking as I opened it, the paper crinkling under my trembling fingers. Inside was a check. When I saw the amount, I thought I was seeing things wrong. I blinked and looked again, my vision blurring with unexpected tears. $100,000, Grandma announced to the stunned crowd, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent yard. "Enough to cover your tuition at Brington College." The silence lasted for about 3 seconds before erupting into chaos, the live stream capturing every moment. Aunt Pamela let out a gasp that could have sucked in half the oxygen in the yard. Uncle Bob started clapping, and soon everyone joined in. My cousins were whooping and cheering, phones raised to capture my reaction. I just sat there, staring at the check through tears that wouldn't stop falling, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. This wasn't just money, it was freedom, opportunity, a chance to go to my dream school without drowning in debt. Grandma, I choked out, standing up to hug her, my voice breaking with emotion. I can't believe, thank you so much. From the corner of my eye, I could see my parents. They weren't clapping. Mom's face had gone pale, her phone lowered, the live stream forgotten. Dad looked like he'd been hit with a brick, his mouth slightly open. They were whispering to each other, their heads close together, occasionally shooting glances at the check in my hands, their expressions a mix of shock and panic. I spent most of the evening talking with Grandma Olivia, my spirits lighter than they'd been in years. She told me stories about her college days as a literature professor and gave me advice about living on campus. It felt like the first time someone in my family was actually excited about my future, truly seeing the path I wanted to take. The guests gradually filtered out as evening fell, leaving behind empty plates and half-full cups. Grandma Olivia decided to spend the night, saying she was too tired to drive home. I helped her set up in our guest room, grateful for a few more hours with her, the check safely tucked into my journal upstairs. The next morning, after a quick breakfast, Grandma hugged me tight and headed home, promising to call soon to help me plan for college. I watched her car disappear down the street, my phone clutched in my hand, still hardly believing what had happened. I snapped a quick photo of her driving away, wanting to remember this moment when someone finally believed in me. It wasn't until that evening that Ethan finally showed up. He walked in without knocking, looking like he'd been sucking on lemons, the faint scent of expensive cologne mixed with stale alcohol following him. His designer clothes were wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes, a stark contrast to the polished image on his social media profiles. "Happy birthday, sis," he mumbled, not quite meeting my eyes, his voice flat as cardboard. No hug, no card, not even a token gift. He headed straight for the kitchen where our parents were, his shoulders hunched, leaving me standing in the hallway, the familiar sting of dismissal burning in my chest. That evening, the atmosphere at the dinner table was so thick you could cut it with a knife, everyone's breathing seeming too loud in the silence. Ethan sat across from me, slouched in his chair and playing with his phone, the screen's blue light reflecting on his face. Dad cleared his throat several times before finally speaking, the sound grating on my already frayed nerves. "Maddie, honey, we need to have a serious family discussion," he began, setting down his fork with a small clink that seemed too loud. "Your brother's been going through a difficult time. His auto parts business, well, things haven't been going as planned." Ethan suddenly looked up from his phone, his face drawn, though I noticed he was still wearing his expensive watch. "The banks are breathing down my neck," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I took out some loans to expand the business, but the market crashed, and now they want their money back." I couldn't help but scoff, the sound escaping before I could stop it. "Really? Because your Instagram shows you vacationing in Hawaii just last month, with different girls in every photo, by the way." The memories of those posts, of him lounging on white sand beaches with drinks in hand while I worked double shifts at the cafe, flashed through my mind. "Stay out of my social media." Ethan snapped, his face reddening, veins standing out on his neck. "That's none of your business." "Calm down, both of you," Dad interrupted, his accountant's voice taking on that authoritative tone he used with difficult clients. "Maddie, this is serious. Your brother could lose everything." I pushed my plate away, the ceramic scraping against the table, my appetite gone, stomach twisting with dread. "What does any of this have to do with me?" Mom and Dad exchanged one of their loaded looks, the kind that made it clear they'd rehearsed this conversation, probably while I was at work or school. "Well, sweetheart," Mom said, her voice honey-sweet, using her real estate closing the deal tone, "family always helps family. That's what we've always taught you, right?" My blood ran cold as I started to understand where this was going, ice spreading through my veins. "We think," Dad continued, carefully controlling his voice, "that the money Grandma gave you could really help Ethan out of this situation." I stared at them in disbelief, my mouth suddenly dry. "You want me to give Ethan my college money?" The words felt strange in my mouth, like I was speaking a foreign language. "It makes perfect sense," Ethan chimed in, suddenly animated, sitting up straight for the first time since he arrived. My business is established. It's more important than some college degree you might not even use. His tone was dismissive, crushing my dreams with casual cruelty. That money is for my education, I protested, my voice rising, heart hammering against my ribs. Grandma gave it to me specifically for Brinton's journalism program. You got a full ride to state, Mom countered, her manicured nails tapping impatiently on the table. You can still go to college, but Ethan needs this money now. No. The word came out firm and clear, surprising even me with its strength. That money is mine. Grandma gave it to me. The change in their faces was instant, like masks dropping. Dad exploded out of his chair, his hand clamping around my wrist like a vice, his wedding ring digging into my skin. He yanked me away from the table, ignoring my cry of pain, my shoulder wrenching. You go to your room right now. He snarled, dragging me toward the stairs, his face contorted with rage I'd never seen before. And you'll stay there until you come to your senses. Don't even think about calling your grandmother. If you breathe a word of this to her, you're out of this house forever, do you understand me? We'll disown you. I lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of the house settling. My wrist still ached where Dad had grabbed me, tender skin already darkening into bruises. I pulled out my phone and took photos of the marks, my hands trembling as I documented the evidence. Around midnight, I heard my parents and Ethan talking in low, angry voices downstairs, but I couldn't make out the words through my closed door. Eventually, the house fell silent, the tension still hanging in the air like a thundercloud. By 5 o'clock in the morning, I'd made up my mind, determination overriding the fear that had kept me awake all night. I pulled my backpack from under the bed and started packing methodically, documents first, birth certificate, social security card, high school diploma. My laptop went in next, then some clothes and toiletries. I grabbed the USB drive where I'd been saving important files and photos for months, somehow sensing I might need an escape plan someday. I checked my wallet. I had about $300 saved up from my part-time job at the cafe, tips I'd hidden away instead of depositing them. The check from Grandma was safely tucked into a journal I kept on my nightstand, hidden between pages of my writing. I added it to my documents, double-checking that everything important was secure. I also slipped in my phone's charging cable and earbuds, lifelines to the outside world. Moving like a ghost, I crept down the stairs, avoiding the third step that always creaked, my socks muffling my footsteps. The house was dark and quiet except for Dad's snoring from the master bedroom, the sound that had been the backdrop to so many nights of my childhood. I grabbed my phone charger from the living room and some granola bars from the kitchen, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would wake everyone. The morning air was cool against my face as I slipped out the back door, dew soaking through my sneakers. I didn't look back, afraid that one glance might weaken my resolve. At the train station, bathed in the harsh fluorescent lights, my phone started buzzing insistently. Mom's face flashed on the screen, her perfect smile now seeming like a stranger's. I declined the call, my finger trembling slightly. Then one from Ethan, declined. Dad, declined. Messages started flooding in, each notification making me flinch. Where are you? Come home right now. You're being ridiculous. Think about your brother. If you don't come back immediately, you'll regret it. This is the most selfish thing you've ever done. I turned off notifications and bought a ticket to Massachusetts, the transaction depleting nearly half my savings. The train wouldn't leave for another hour, so I sat in the station's cafe, my backpack clutched tight against my chest, jumping at every sound, scanning each new face that entered for any sign of my family. It was late afternoon when I finally reached Grandma Olivia's house, the historic building with its wraparound porch a beacon of safety. She opened the door, and her eyes went wide with surprise, her hand flying to her heart. Maddie! What on earth? She ushered me inside, the scent of books and lavender enveloping me. Your father called me this morning. He said you'd run off with some boy, that you were planning to waste the college money on parties. That's a lie. The words burst out of me, hot tears threatening to spill. They wanted me to give the money to Ethan. His business is failing, and they tried to force me to give him my college fund. When I refused, Dad. I touched my wrist where the bruises were clearly visible now, purple against my pale skin. They locked me in my room and threatened to disown me if I told you. I pulled out my phone, showing her the photos I'd taken of my bruised wrist, digital proof of what had happened. Grandma's face went from concern to thunderous, her academic's composure giving way to cold fury. Without a word, she pulled out her phone and dialed Dad's number, putting it on speaker, her hand steady unlike mine. Gregory? Yes, Maddie's here. Oh, thank God. Dad's voice crackled through the speaker, relief poorly masking the tension. Mom, she's been acting out, making up stories. Save it, Grandma cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade. She told me everything, about Ethan's failing business, about you trying to steal her college fund, about you threatening her. And I've seen the bruises, Gregory. Mom, she's lying. She's just being dramatic. I said save it. Grandma's voice could have frozen fire, her professor's authority in full force. I've watched for years as you favored Ethan, as you spoiled him rotten while neglecting Maddie. I've helped you financially time and time again, hoping you'd change. Well, I'm done. From this moment, you can consider my financial support ended, and I'll be calling my lawyer tomorrow to update my will. You and Ethan won't be seeing a penny. She hung up, then turned to me, her face softening like snow in sunlight. You'll stay here with me until college starts, she said firmly, taking my hand in hers. And don't worry about a thing. I have plenty of room, and it's about time this old house had some young energy in it again. Living with Grandma Olivia was like stepping into a different world, like suddenly being able to breathe after years underwater. Every morning, I'd wake up to the smell of coffee and whatever she was baking. Her specialty was apple pie with cinnamon that filled the whole house with warmth, but she made amazing blueberry muffins too, bursting with fruit she picked herself. I helped around the house, doing the cleaning and laundry, the physical work soothing my still raw emotions. It wasn't because she asked me to, I wanted to contribute somehow, to earn my place in this sanctuary. We fell into an easy rhythm together, sharing meals at her antique dining table, watching old movies on her comfortable sofa, and talking about everything and nothing. She shared stories from her professor days, and I found myself opening up about my hopes for journalism, words flowing freely in a way they never had at home. My phone kept buzzing with messages and calls, disrupting our peaceful days. Mom, Dad, and Ethan tried every platform they could think of: phone calls, texts, Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn, where Dad connected with my profile for the first time ever. Their messages ranged from guilt-tripping, "How could you do this to your family?" to angry, "You're making a huge mistake," to manipulative, "Ethan might lose everything because of you." I ignored them all, though each notification made my heart race. Meanwhile, I started a blog, anonymous but honest, where I wrote about family dynamics and finding your own path. To my surprise, people responded, sharing similar stories, offering support, creating a community I never knew I needed. The summer passed quietly, punctuated by drives to the coast with Grandma, evenings reading on her porch, and mornings helping her tend her small garden. Finally, August arrived, golden and full of promise, and it was time for me to start at Brington. Grandma helped me move into my dorm room, making my bed with fresh sheets she'd ironed herself and arranging my things just so, her hands gentle but efficient. My roommate Jessica seemed nice, a photography major with a quick laugh, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly excited about my future, possibilities stretching out before me like an open road. The first month of college was a whirlwind of new experiences, every day bringing something unexpected. Classes were challenging but fascinating, especially my journalism ethics seminar. I was making friends who actually listened when I spoke, and I'd even joined the campus newspaper, my first article about first-generation college students getting positive feedback from the editor. For once, I wasn't living in Ethan's shadow, I was just Maddie, finding my own path, my confidence growing with each byline. Then one Tuesday, my resident advisor knocked on my door, her expression carefully neutral. "Maddie, your parents are here." They're waiting at the campus coffee shop. My stomach dropped like a stone, but I knew this confrontation was inevitable. I pulled out my phone and quickly texted Grandma, letting her know what was happening, then walked across campus, the autumn leaves crunching under my feet. I found them sitting at a corner table, both looking somewhat deflated compared to the last time I'd seen them, the harsh coffee shop lighting revealing new lines on their faces. Maddie, Mom reached for my hand, her perfectly manicured nails gleaming, but I kept my hands firmly in my lap. You look good. College agrees with you. What do you want? I asked, getting straight to the point, my voice steadier than I felt. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the leather jacket he wore to appear younger than his years creaking slightly. We wanted to apologize. We were wrong to try to take your college money. We were wrong to threaten you. We were wrong about a lot of things. I waited, knowing there was more. There always was with them, the other shoe always waiting to drop. We were hoping, Dad continued, his voice carefully measured like when he presented financial options to clients, that maybe you could talk to your grandmother about her will. We're not asking for your money anymore, but... No, I said simply, the word freeing. If you want to fix things with Grandma, you'll have to talk to her yourselves. I'm not getting involved. They exchanged frustrated looks, a silent conversation passing between them that excluded me, just like always. Maddie, be reasonable, Dad started, his accountant's voice slipping into that patronizing tone I'd heard all my life. I am being reasonable. For the first time in my life, I'm putting myself first. If you want to repair your relationship with Grandma, that's between you and her. My hands were steady as I reached for my water, no longer shaking at their disapproval. Mom's face hardened, her real estate agent's smile disappearing completely. So that's it? You won't help your family at all? After everything we've done for you? I stood up, gathering my things, the weight of their expectations sliding off my shoulders. You know what's funny? When you wanted my college money, it was family helps family, but you never helped me. Ever. It only goes one way with you, doesn't it? The truth of it settled in my chest, no longer a bitter pill but simply a fact I could acknowledge and move beyond. 2 months into my first semester at Brington, my phone lit up with a text from Aunt Pamela. A screenshot followed Ethan's latest Instagram post showing him posing with a new iPhone, captioned upgrade time. #blessed despite his supposed financial ruin. Minutes later, my phone rang with her call. I almost didn't answer, she'd always been closer to Mom's side of things, but something made me swipe to accept. Maddie, are you sitting down? Her voice was hushed, like she was sharing state secrets, the sound of her moving to a private space coming through the line. I thought you should know what's happening back home. Ethan's business, it's completely gone under. He owes the banks hundreds of thousands. He's moved back in with your parents, taking over his old bedroom like the last 7 years never happened. I let that sink in, a strange mix of emotions washing over me. The mighty Ethan, who'd always looked down on my impractical journalism dreams, was back in his childhood bedroom, while I sat at my desk covered with notes for my feature article that the campus paper had chosen for the front page. Your parents, Aunt Pamela continued, her voice dropping even lower, they're spending their retirement savings to help him with the debts. Your father's talking about taking out a second mortgage on the house. Yet somehow Ethan still managed to buy the latest iPhone, I saw it on his Instagram today. He's still posting as if nothing's changed. I glanced at my laptop, where a draft of my latest blog post sat open, an exploration of family dynamics and breaking harmful patterns. My anonymous blog had gained a small but dedicated following, readers who found comfort and strength in similar stories. Later that same week, Grandma called while I was walking back from the library, the campus beautiful with autumn colors. I had some visitors today, she said, and I could hear the weariness in her voice. Your parents showed up on my doorstep, unannounced. They were begging me to help with Ethan's debts, said they were going to lose everything if I didn't reconsider my decision about the will. She paused, and I could picture her sitting in her favorite chair, phone in hand. I told them no, said they needed to handle this situation themselves for once. How did they take it? I asked, finding a bench to sit on, the cool air crisp in my lungs. About as well as you'd expect. Your mother cried, your father got angry, but I stood firm. I told them this was the consequence of years of spoiling Ethan rotten while ignoring you. I showed them your latest article in the college paper, the one I had framed. They didn't even know you were writing for it. As the semester progressed, more news trickled in through various relatives and social media glimpses. Dad had taken a second job at a late-night accounting service. Mom had quietly listed some of her jewelry on an online marketplace. Meanwhile, Ethan's social media continued to show him living as if nothing had changed, new clothes, nights out, and vague posts about his next big venture. During fall break, I went to stay with Grandma, the drive from campus to her house feeling like a journey from one home to another. We baked pies together in her warm kitchen, and she helped me research my term paper on ethical journalism. She'd set up a proper guest room for me with a desk, good lighting, and everything I needed for studying, more thoughtful support than I'd ever had in my parents' house. Your midterm grades came, she mentioned one evening as we sat by the fireplace, the flames casting a warm glow across the room filled with books and memories. Straight as. I'm so proud of you, Maddie. And your editor tells me they're considering you for assistant editor next semester. Thanks, Grandma. I hesitated before asking, the question that had been weighing on me finally finding voice. Do you ever regret cutting them off? She set down her knitting and looked at me seriously, her eyes clear and direct behind her glasses. Not for a second. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people is let them face the consequences of their actions. It's a lesson I learned late in life, but an important one. She was right, of course. Every time I heard about my family's financial struggles, a small part of me felt guilty, a twinge in my chest that was hard to ignore. But then I'd remember all the years of favoritism, all the Christmases with just a card while Ethan got expensive gifts, all the times they dismissed my achievements while celebrating Ethan's smallest accomplishments. Now, I was thriving at Brington, making friends who appreciated my thoughts, earning top grades in classes that challenged me, writing articles that resonated with readers, and planning for a future I'd chosen. Meanwhile, they were dealing with the consequences of their choices, still trapped in the same patterns that had defined our family for years. It wasn't my job to fix their mistakes. It never had been. The last I saw on social media, Ethan was posting about some new business idea involving cryptocurrency, and based on my parents' enthusiastic comments, they were still somehow trying to find ways to fund it. Some patterns are hard to break, I guess. But I had broken free of those patterns, thanks to Grandma's gift and her belief in me. As I finished my latest blog post, titled Finding Your Own Path, When Family Patterns Break, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. My words weren't just helping me process my experiences, they were reaching others in similar situations. The comments section filled with stories of people finding their own strength, their own voice. In helping others, I was helping myself. In sharing my story, I was creating my future, one entirely of my own making.